Hello, Iben Thranholm in Denmark. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Bob.
Okay, we have a comment now from Deacon Mowry. Hello from Northern Ohio on Lake Erie. Okay, and we have some other people joining us, and it's the 16th of January, 2025, more or less still the new year. I want to wish you a happy new year, Eben, and tell you that you created an uproar with your last remarks about the church and about the need for unity. And people approved of you, supported you, and then some other people said that you were not defending the truth and the Orthodox doctrine sufficiently. I wonder how
hmm
you respond to that.
Well, yeah, I have had some considerations, of course, after I read some of the comments on YouTube, but I still think that it's very important that we stay united. And I want to, I want to put up a question. I mean, let's say that you are not a Catholic and you were reading some of the Catholic media, for instance, like Site News or some of these websites that are very critical towards the hierarchy of the church, or you were listening to podcasts about or Twitter posts about our hierarchy and our leaders, and you were not a Catholic. Would you really like to become a Catholic if you were looking into all these conflicts
Mhm.
and how Catholics are talking about their leaders like they're no good and they're heretics and they're just like corrupt and all these things? You would say, no, I just want to find another religion. I don't want to be part of that club because, I mean, it seems that they have really bad leaders. I mean, for instance, back in the days when we had Church Militant, which was run by Michael Warris, I mean,
Mm.
anybody outside the church who was reading on this website would say, I definitely don't want to become a Catholic. So I think we have to understand that when people before in history became Catholics, it was because they saw how wonderful the community was within the Christian circles,
Mm.
because how they were united, how they loved each other, how they helped each other, how they prayed for each other. So right now we are making all these divisions and we hate each other and we are bad mouthing each other, and especially our leaders and our bishops. So if somebody becomes a Catholic these days, it's simply because the person would meet Christ himself in the church in the sacraments, not because of the Catholics. I'm sorry to say that. There are many good Catholics. There are many, Catholics who are doing a lot of sacrifices and helping other people, people from religious orders, and just lay people who are very good people. I'm not saying that all Catholics are behaving badly, but I would say that if you go to the media and you would try to get an idea about what is the Catholic Church, you would actually take a stand back and say, I would not be part of this. So if somebody becomes a Catholic today, it's simply because Christ is present and is alive in the church. And I think that is why the Catholic Church will, of course, survive no matter how bad the Pope is, no
Okay.
matter how, and no matter how sinful that Catholics are, Christ would still be present in the church. And I think, I'm sorry to say this to your viewers, but it's not you who are going to save the church. I mean, it is simply Christ who will save the church and us. So we should have some more confidence in that Christ will act, and not only us, criticizing the Pope, because we are just being told to follow Christ. We're not being told to criticize the Pope. We're being told to follow Christ. And I think we have had so many bad popes before in history. Look at the time, I also mentioned that last time, when we had two popes, and the popes were in Avignon. We have
Yes.
had terrible popes, and the church has always survived, and it will also survive Pope Francis. So I think we have bigger fish to fry than simply making the Catholic Church look like something that is a terrible institution, which is actually what we are telling about our own church right now to the people outside the church. And I think that's not good.
Okay, Eben, you're presenting a thesis that I uphold as well, that we have to defend the unity of the church, and that we do so not so much for ourselves, but simply for the fact of Jesus Christ as the founder and the heart and leader of the church, and the human beings who strive to follow him, and disciples, and even poor people like ourselves are here only to testify to this good shepherd who is really above us and before us and after us, Alpha and Omega. And I have been so impressed by your faith. You came into the church, but you didn't come in precisely for the people in the church. You came in because you heard an echo from eternity that echoed in your own heart. You've described to me your conversion. And somehow we're simply trying to repeat that almost in every broadcast, in every podcast. And we just had someone from Sao Paulo, Brazil, saying that they love to hear Iben Thranholm and hear how she presents the faith. So I think we should go back just for a moment. What do you think you are as a human being? What was the loneliness you may have felt as you did not have the faith, or maybe any faith? I'm not sure. You were a theology student. And what happened to you? We talked about this before, but it's always fresh, I think.
Yeah, I was studying theology. I come from a Protestant family that was very devout. My parents were attending church every Sunday. We prayed at home, and I was raised with the faith. And I knew nothing of the Catholic faith at all. And when I was studying theology at the University of Copenhagen, I thought I may become a pastor in the Lutheran Church, because that is what my old friends from university are today, and some of them are even bishops.
Hmm.
And I had one friend at the university who was a Catholic, and he was at a certain time he gave a birthday party, and he said to us, because he was very devout Catholic, and he said to all the guests, "I would like you to attend mass before the dinner, because I think that this is the way I would like to celebrate my birthday. So even though you're not Catholics, would you please attend?"
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, yeah, why not? I mean, I could do that, but I had no idea about what it really was. So for me, it was just
Hmm.
something I had to do so the party could, get over with it, so the party could begin. But at that time, I went to church every Sunday at a Protestant church, and I studied theology, and I thought, that my faith was fine. But then when I came for this mass before the birthday party. I remember when I was sitting in the church, suddenly I just felt this tremendous presence of something that was so gentle, that was so loving, that was so peaceful, and really was a presence that knew me. I knew really who I was. So I felt like just starting to cry because I was so moved. And I could not explain what it was, because it was not anything the priest said in his homily or music. And the church was not that beautiful. So it was not because I was taken by some kind of, image or colors or something of music, something that could, that could make me feel like that. It was simply a mystical presence of something that was so profound and that was so loving. And first of all, I had the feeling that this presence knew all about me, all my secrets, who I was, and was, embracing me. And that was a completely, overwhelming experience, because I never felt like that in a church before. So later on, to make a long story short, I started, to attend Catholic mass, and I often went into a Catholic church, and I had this feeling of peace, and there was this presence. And I realize, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but as a Protestant theologian, you don't know anything about Catholic theology, at least not in Denmark, because Denmark is a very Protestant country. So the Catholics are dangerous, and it's, they regard Catholics as hypocrites, or people who are not really Christians. So we don't really knew a lot about Catholic theology at the faculty where I studied. But then, of course, I started to investigate a little bit, and I realized what was the theology behind the Eucharist, and of course the Blessed Sacrament. And I realized that I had a reaction to that without knowing what it really was. So that, of course, really convinced me that it was true, because I felt it even before I knew what it was. I felt this peace, and whatever, the Catholic Church teaches that it is, I had that experience before I knew the theology. Even I was studying theology, so that was quite profound. So after a long, it actually took me some years. Then I decided I really wanted to receive communion, and I want to be part of the Catholic Church. And also because later on I understood that the Catholic theology is much more profound, it's much deeper, and I think it's actually the truth, where I see that there are a lot of things that are in the Protestant theology that is simplified and is actually not true. So I really wanted to not be a Protestant anymore, and I never ever regretted, cutting the bonds to Protestantism. But of course, it was a strange experience for me being a theologian, and all my friends were going to be pastors, that I had to, go to the church office and in my parish church and ask for, to cancel my membership of the Danish state church. I never ever thought I should be in that situation, but it felt good, and I think it was the right decision. And I would say, I would end up saying that it was really not my idea to become a Catholic. It was simply God's invitation. And I think because I have had that experience with the Eucharist, even before I knew anything about Catholic theology, for me, this is the heart of the faith. This is the heart of the church. And it means it's untouched by any bad pope, any bad priest. It doesn't matter, because this is a mystical experience, and this is a mystical thing which is totally and only connected to Christ, because it's only because of Christ, and it will always be there, and Christ can never be chased out of the church, because he is the church. I mean, the church is his mystical body. And even though we have only bad priests and they're all heretics and we have bad popes, it will never change that the sacrament is valid, no matter what, as long as they are ordained. And I think that is so extremely important, because when you are Protestant, even though that Protestants always criticizes Catholics because we have this priest which is in between man and God, and they have this personal relationship with Jesus, so they don't need any kind of intercessor like the priest is, they believe. But actually, in the Protestant church, the priest is becoming very, very important, because people are so occupied with the homily, and whether it is a priest who is a good, preacher and can, make good homilies and things like that. So it's very focused on the priest as a person and his performance. Whereas in the Catholic Church, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't care whether I hear a bad homily or a good homily, because I come for the Mass to receive Christ and in the sacrament. And no matter how bad the priest is, I mean, Christ is still there. So I think that for me, I guess that's why I react so hard to the idea that we should be focused on what the Pope. Of course, we want a Pope who is Orthodox and is not, teaching us something that is not Christianity or Catholicism. But still, even if he does, the church is still the mystical body of Christ.
Okay, that's a long and thoughtful reflection on your conversion and on the nature of the church. I have a lot of different thoughts that I could take from what you said, but I suppose I would like to get closer to the question of your mystical experience, and I try to understand what it is about a human being that can be in contact with the Supreme Spirit, the Supreme Being, with God Himself. How is that possible?
Because we have a soul. And I think the soul is really, I mean, like St. Augustine says, our hearts are restless until it finds, rest in you. And it means that we are created to love God. We are created to be unified with God, to be in union with God. And we are created to love God. And that's why the first commandment is that you should love God. Above all things, you should love God first, because we are created for that. And if you don't do that, I mean, you will feel anxious. You will maybe even feel depressed. You would feel restless. and you will try to fill that God-shaped hole within you with all sorts of things. And I think when I entered that church and I sat down, and it was the first mass I ever attended,
mm,
I think what I felt was that this, emptiness, this kind of God-shaped hole we all of us has in us because of original sin. Suddenly, there was somebody who could fill up that kind of empty void, and that was
mm,
the presence of Christ. And this is what we all need. And unfortunately, we're living in the time of psychology, and psychology has rejected the idea that man has a soul. They
mm,
believe we are only a body and mind, and that's why so many people today are so frustrated and so feel so lonely and are so anxious, because they
mhm,
don't take care of their soul. And the soul is what connects with God,
mm,
and the soul is what is going to live forever, not our mind or our body, but our soul will live forever. It is destined for eternity, and that's why the soul is always looking for God. And I think even anxiety can be a kind of, I would call it, an alarm signal from the soul that it needs God. And
mhm,
if it doesn't have God, or you're trying to avoid God, or you are living a sinful life and you're far away from God, your soul needs to, cry out by, giving you anxiety to try to make you look for God, because
mm.
this is what is needed in your life. And I think that's why I reacted as I did when I went into that church, because my soul was longing for the true presence of Christ. You don't have that in the Protestant church, because you don't have the tabernacle and you don't have the mass, because you have like a service, but a service is not a mass. You don't have the sacrifice on the altar anymore. You simply have a kind of, memory communion service, but it's not the sacrifice being re-actualized like it does in the Catholic Church. So that was a tremendous thing for me, that suddenly I realized, wow, there is, this is reality. This is the truth. This is real life. Because I think nowadays we tend to live out of reality, out of, so there's so many lies, and there's so many things that we're being told that are untrue. So to have this experience with the truth, the ultimate truth, the absolute truth, this is what the soul are longing for. And when it finally meets that, you know ultimate truth, of course it feels like, whoa, it's like a sponge, that is dry, and you put it into water, so you just feel like you're
Wow.
coming back to life.
Okay. I'm again very appreciative of you, Eben. For me too, to hear what you say, just like this man writes, Gonzalo Suarez. It is so moving to listen to these conversion stories. It reinvigorates our old, lazy, everyday faith. So thank you. You're reinvigorating. And so in a sense, you're speaking of the liturgy as a place, the church, the Eucharist, the Mass, a place of encounter with God.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of debate today, and I think uh, it's not wrong to have a discussion about the liturgy and about where one can encounter God. I think uh, I'm thinking of a phrase that the Pope. Um, I'm going to try to share my screen here and read a phrase that the Pope gave. Can you see this now?
Yeah, it's very small,
Oh, it's too
but
small.
yeah, no, I'll
I'm going to
make
try
it
to
bigger.
make it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I've made it bigger now.
Okay. So, um, oh, okay. So, as the Pope was coming back from Brazil on his first international trip in the summer of 2013, this is Pope Francis. He went to Rio de Janeiro for World Youth Day. And on the way back, he gave an hour and a half press conference. So this is one of the first really big press conferences he gave in his pontificate. And then was a Russian there named Alexei Bukalov. And he said, "Good evening, Holy Father. Returning to ecumenism. Today, the Orthodox." This was in the end of 2013, and he was referring to the year 988, which was the conversion of the Slavic peoples in a kind of communal baptism under Prince Vladimir in 988 in Kiev, in the river, Dnieper. They all were baptized together, 988. So he says we are celebrating 1,025 years of Christianity, and there are great festivities in many capital cities. If you would comment on this, I would be grateful. Thank you. And here's what Pope Francis said. Can you see this? I'm not sure what
Yeah,
you see. Okay.
yeah, I see.
In the Orthodox churches, they have retained that pristine liturgy, which is so beautiful. He's referring to the Byzantine liturgy with the chants and, the songs and Lord have mercy. And we have lost some of that sense of adoration. No, we have lost some of the sense of adoration. The Orthodox preserved it. They praise God. They adore God. They sing. Time does not matter. God is at the center. And I would like to say, as you ask me this question, that this is a richness. And so here Pope Francis is more or less saying the same thing that you just told us about your experience in church that day, that God was at the center, that people were adoring God, that time did not matter. You felt the presence of eternity. So then he continues, once speaking of the Western church of Western Europe, especially the older church, they said this phrase to me, lux ex oriente, ex occidente luxus. So lux is light, ex oriente is from the east. The light is from the east. Ex is from occidente, from the west, is luxus. That's luxury or pleasure or consumerism, comfort, he says. Consumerism, comfort. They have done such harm. So he's saying the West has become materialistic. Instead, he's speaking to the Russian journalist, you retain this beauty of God in the center, the reference point. And then he says, when reading Dostoevsky, he's referring to Fyodor Dostoevsky, who wrote in the 1870s and in St. Petersburg. He was arrested once and imprisoned, but he wrote Crime and Punishment. He wrote The Brothers Karamazov. He wrote beautiful books, and he's always dealing with spiritual questions. This was 40 years before the Soviets took over the Russian people. When reading Dostoevsky, I believe that for all of us, he is an author that we must read and reread due to his wisdom. One senses what the Russian soul is. This is Pope Francis speaking. What the Eastern soul is. It is something that does us much good. We need this renewal, this fresh air from the East, this light from the East, lux ex oriente. John Paul II wrote about this in his letter. He's referring, I think, to the letter Odunum Sint, that we may be one. But many times the luxus, that is the luxury, the pleasure, the consumerism of the West makes us lose this horizon. I don't know, but these are the thoughts that come to me. Thank you. All right, so I thought that was an interesting statement by the Pope. Also, in the context of the debate today over the type of liturgy we have in the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin Rite, the Old Rite, the Tridentine Mass, I just wondered if you had any comments on what the Pope said there and your own experience of the liturgy.
Yeah, I think he's right that consumerism has taken so much of or it takes so much space in our culture, and we're so consumed by consumerism, so we forget everything about what it means to adore God. or to have this adoration, which is actually very, very important in any culture, this reverence for God.
Yeah.
But I also think that for people outside the church, or even people inside the church, to find this, connection with God would be through liturgy. Because right now there are so many, like I said before, so much criticism, so many voices saying bad things, so many different views on what should the church do, what is the church. But if you go for mass and if you go for adoration, if you just are together with Christ in the liturgy, Christ will speak to your heart and he will guide you, so you can sort of shut down all the noise that is around you, because there is a lot of noise right now everywhere.
Well,
not
wait,
only not only consumerism, but because of social media there's so much noise,
but
and you can really get lost in all the commentators and all the ideas about what you should believe and what you should think, and who is a globalist and who is somebody who wants to ruin the church, and if you get lost in that, you lose your faith. And that's why I say don't read Catholic media if you want to become a Catholic, because you would say this is terrible, these people, I don't want to be part of that group.
okay.
So that's why we have to
I
really
think
stress
you're kind of undercutting our own work, but okay.
no, but I say I think if more people just attended liturgy and started to go for adoration and praise God, it would be much easier for them to connect with God and know
Well,
what is the truth, and let God speak to their heart.
okay.
Because if you go for liturgy and you shut down all the noise, you will have an encounter with God and he will speak to you, and this is what you need, and you need that more than listening to all the commentators on Twitter.
Okay.
Sorry to say this.
Once again, Eben, you hit the nail on the head. You're the Viking theologian in the Catholic Church who is becoming the most prominent voice today for mystical union with Christ. And what you don't know, what the readers and viewers don't know, is that you have gone to the silence, actually. Where are you right now, Eben? What's the truth?
Right now, I'm in Denmark for a few weeks. Otherwise I'm in Budapest, but I'm here in Denmark for a few weeks on a kind of break holiday, you would call it, and I'm in a Benedictine monastery.
Ah,
Just
so
just
you're in a monastery.
It's just 20 kilometers north of the city center in Copenhagen, so it's actually part of Copenhagen, you could say.
So what
And
are you thinking of becoming a monk?
a nun. I'm not transgender, so I won't become a monk. I would become a nun. No, no. But here, the Benedictine order is known for their hospitality, and I was here all summer to write a book, which is being published in a few weeks. That's also why I'm here in Denmark to promote my book. And the sisters here are extremely helpful, very loving, very caring. So they have the most wonderful guest section. It's like a 4-star hotel. It's totally renovated. The beds are the best mattresses you can have. The furnitures are fantastic, and the nature outside here from the building is wonderful. And I really like to come here for mass as well. And now because I have rented my place since I'm away for so long, so when I'm here just for a week or two, they told me I could always stay here in the monastery. So that's why I'm here.
Okay.
And I really enjoy it, because it's not only, of course, it's quiet here because it's a monastery, but it's not only quiet, it's peaceful. And there is such a big difference between a place that is quiet and a place that is peaceful, because peace means love and means that there is this fullness of Christ, whereas a place that is just quiet can be very empty and can make you feel not very good. But if you are, my room is not very far from the church here, and where is the tabernacle, and I sleep fantastic at night because it's so peaceful, because Christ is in this house, and it's just fantastic. And it's a huge difference from, you can go to all sorts of really nice places that are calm and quiet and beautiful, but it's not the same as peace. Peace is something that really contains a lot of presence and love, and like somebody who is Christ will care for you, and that's a huge difference for me, and I really feel it.
Well, now I have to recommend this to Deborah as a place to take our pilgrims. If you say it's such a beautiful monastery and the beds have good mattresses.
Yeah, it is really a treat to be here. It's a really treat
All
because
right,
everything here is so
so des-
renovated.
destination Copenhagen.
Yeah, but
All right.
then it would be an experience to be here to visit the Catholic Church in a Protestant country. But actually, we have quite a lot of sites that refers back to the Catholic time, because Denmark was actually Catholic for more than 700 years before
Okay. Yeah.
before we became Protestants. So we have a huge Catholic past, but people have completely forgotten it because the Protestants were so clever at writing the history books and just telling bad things about our Catholic past. So people have no idea about what it is. But my dream is to try to revitalize Catholicism here, because we are actually Catholics in our history. So it's part of our Danish identity to be Catholic. So we should not forget about it.
Okay. So you're in a way a figure in church history and in the history of Denmark who's trying to build a bridge back 500-600 years to a period that's been lost, and then bring the bring Denmark sort of back together into its entire spiritual tradition.
Yeah, I actually think that it was very traumatic for Danes to be cut off from the Catholic roots because the king, ordered them to become Protestants. I think it was actually an abuse, and it took away people's ability or right, I would say, to worship and to have spirituality. And it was just really a disaster. It is a big wound in our history that we became Protestants, in my opinion.
All right. So you're trying to heal a wound. Now, don't you feel that wound sort of is widening all across Western culture despite the advance of our technology, the artificial intelligence that's arriving, and all the ideologies that have spread, when we've forgotten the Logos, the Word of God, Jesus Christ? So, how do you assess in 2025 the predicament that we're in?
You mean that
Our,
what's going to
our
happen?
Western society and our people,
What's
the happiness and unhappiness of our people.
Well, you see that the more we sort of drift away from God, the more depressed people become. I mean, you see that the statistics for people who are suffering from anxiety disorders and depression and loneliness is just skyrocketing. I mean, it's really a kind of pandemic all over the Western world, that people do not have, they're not healthy when it comes to their mental health. I mean, it's simply really a big mental health crisis. And here in Denmark, it is especially the young people, teenagers. We have a huge problem with teenagers that are not able to function, and they get medicated, they're under treatment. It's really, really a problem. And I do believe that it's because nobody takes care of their souls, and they're just consumerists, and they are into this new technology, and it means that they have no spiritual life. And now we tried this secular project for quite a number of years, and it seems that it doesn't make people happy. People have never had so much freedom to build the life they want, exactly what they want. I mean, they can choose whatever they want in life, they can become whatever they want to, but yet people have no joy, and people are very anxious, they're very fearful, and they're very depressed. Here in Denmark, which is one of the most well-functioning countries in the world, I mean, we have so much welfare. We even, students even get a salary from the state when they go to university. They have, they can choose whatever they want, more or less, and yet they are so unhappy. They're not happy in life. Why not? I think it's because we lack the fundamental understanding of what is a human being. A human being is created to have a relationship with God. And this is totally pushed out of our culture. And this is why people are suffering. So I
Okay.
think the more we tend to forget God, the more we advance in our technology to try to, improve life, but we still do not want to have anything to do with God, the worse it will get. And maybe God allows this to make us understand that we cannot build a civilization where people can flourish without Him. I don't know. Maybe He wants to let people just try, and then they realize it's not possible.
Okay. You said you just finished a book. Can you tell us a preview of what you say?
Yes, and my book is actually trying to reach out to people who are in a mental health crisis, because I write about anxiety. The title in Danish is the Word of Christ. Do not worry,
Could you say it?
because
Can you say it in Danish?
vær ikke bekymret. Vær ikke bekymret. So yeah, if you don't know Danish, you would not know that it means do not worry. But it's actually a book series. We have a publishing house here for some years that have had a book series. It's called Christianity According to, and then they ask some kind of personal or some kind of public figure or a politician or somebody who's known to write 100 pages, 10 chapters about their personal relationship with Christianity. So you can choose your own theme or your own topic, your own perspective, as long as it is a personal story. So I chose anxiety because when I was a child, I was very anxious and I suffered from, really severe anxiety. And because I grew up in a Christian family, I know what it means to have a faith when you are suffering from some kind of anxiety disorder. So I would just want to pass on my life story to young people and to people who are suffering the same way I did, because I know exactly what they're going through. And one of the reasons why I converted to the Catholic Church was also because I felt this tremendous peace. And if you are struggling with anxiety, and you finally meet this peace that Christ can give you. Christ says, I can give you what the world cannot give you, which is, he said, my peace I give you, and I give you not like the world will give you. He says that in the Gospel of John. And it means that his peace is not the peace that the world can give you. Like I said before, maybe you can go to a quiet, beautiful place, but it's not peace if Christ is not there in your heart. So I simply have, in 10 chapters, I'm talking about how the gospel, how the presence of Christ can help you if you're struggling with anxiety. And then I'm also writing about confession and the Eucharist. And so I also go deeper into the sacraments, because like we talked about before, I really do believe that the way to find this peace of Christ is through the liturgy and through the sacraments. So this is one of the focus points in my book. And so it's mainly about how the Catholic Church can help people that are in a state of anxiety.
I see. All right. What else is on your mind, even right now? You said you have.
Yesterday I was at the Danish Parliament.
Oh, we have one question. Will your book be translated into English? Someone is asking.
Yes, actually, I am already working on the English the English translation, and I will hopefully find an American publisher soon, so it will be out in America as well. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and we have a comment. Denmark is a beautiful country. What would be the highlights of Denmark? Someone is asking. Then you can go back to the Parliament.
Yeah, well, I would say Roskilde, which is a city not far away from Copenhagen, where all our kings and queens are buried, because it is a huge cathedral. It was built as a Catholic cathedral at this place because that was the city where the kings were living back in the medieval time. It's a fantastic cathedral. It's so big. and it's so beautiful, and it's very Catholic. Now, of course, it is Protestant, but that will be one of the highlights. But there are others, and we have also very old churches. Many of the Protestant churches today used to be Catholic churches, so we still have a lot of things left. I was in the Parliament yesterday because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had an event together with Open Doors, which is an organization that are trying to monitoring the persecutions of Christians and writing about it and reporting about it, and then Amnesty International. And today, there is 380 million Christians who are being persecuted around the world. And yesterday it was mainly about the situation in Africa, the South Sahara situation, Nigeria, where also Catholic priests has been killed, and Catholic churches has been attacked, and it's really, really, really brutal what's going on.
Who is attacking Iben?
It's Muslims, Boko Haram, these groups, and of course people don't like, because of political correctness, to say that it's militant, aggressive Muslims who are doing this, but this is a fact. It is the Muslims who are initiating all this violence against Christians, no matter if you like it or not. It's just a fact. It's, I was just very frustrated to see all these politicians, because they really have, they have some idea about that we should just promote human rights. So, nobody really talked about that this is a spiritual war on Christians. They say, oh yeah, we need to strengthen human rights. Okay, yeah, that's a good thing. I'm not against that. But what is really going on is that Christianity is really under attack. And as Catholics, we tend to think that Africa is the strong, it is like what do you call it? A kind of stronghold against, no, that's not the right word. What would you say? Like a fort against
a fortress.
A fortress, yes, against modernism, because we have all these African bishops and priests who are very conservative and very traditional. So we as Catholics, we tend to look to Africa as hope for Christianity. But there was a scholar from Nigeria who's now in Holland, in Amsterdam, and he came to give a talk, and he was writing a PhD on the situation in Nigeria, and he gave a talk where he told about the horrible things that happened in Nigeria, and that was committed by Boko Haram. And afterwards I talked to him, and I said to him, do you think that there is a risk that Africa, or Christianity in Africa, could fall and Africa could be completely overtaken by Islam? And he said, yes, that is something that could happen. And I think we should be much more concerned about this situation than, all these infights between Catholics about who is, has the right tradition. Of course, it's important that we keep the faith, but meanwhile, our our brothers and sisters are being slaughtered. We also here in Europe are under attack. I mean, in the United Kingdom, now you have 50 cities that has a Muslim mayor. And he said to me, this Nigerian scholar, PhD, yesterday, he said, I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years you would have a Muslim prime minister in one of the European countries. I read also yesterday that a Best Western, this hotel chain,
yes,
in the UK now, one of these hotels that are in this Best Western chain has a Muslim owner or director or whatever you call it, and he has banned pork and alcohol in this hotel. So it's just it's just developing very slowly, but it's coming. And if we don't, and he said to me, the only way to deal with this is to evangelize the Muslims. And I totally agree with him. He said, if we don't evangelize the Muslims, it will happen. And we talked about also North Africa when St. Augustine was bishop there, because it was a
Yes.
very vibrant, flourishing Christian community. And a few years or decades after St. Augustine died, it became Islamic and it never returned to Christianity. And this could happen to all of Africa, because he said because of the violence, sooner or later the Christians get tired, because they cannot, I mean, it's so dangerous. So sooner or later, if the violence is just, getting stronger and stronger, they simply give up and convert to Islam just to have a normal life.
But we have one viewer saying, uh, Gent Z says, North African imams are complaining that many, many Muslims are converting to Christianity.
It's true that in the Middle East and in some African countries, you see conversions to Christianity. That's true. But I think still there is a kind of very, very, very hard struggle going on between Christians and Muslims. And I think we should be more aware of that. And I would love the Pope to speak out on this, because I think that we are too silent and we cannot leave this only to the politicians. And that was really what I got out of listening to this, to all these NGOs yesterday and to the politicians, is that we cannot leave this alone to the politicians, because what they can do is just to promote human rights. They will never fight for Christians because they don't really care about Christianity. And I think the church should be much more, I would say, militant in their attempt, out of love for Muslims, to convert them, not because we want to, force them to convert to avoid the violence, but simply because we have to look into the theological matters where they say that Christ is not the Son of God. And we know from the first letter of John that everybody who says that is Antichrist. So we need to get them out of this deception that they believe that Christ is not the Son of God. So we should do that out of love for Christ and for the Muslims. And I think that we are very passive when it comes to that. Also here in Europe, I mean, we could, for instance, all the immigrants that comes here, why not start to talk to them about God? I see here in Denmark that Muslims, they don't respect very secular, non-believing people. They think that they are just really totally off the track. And they become even more radical here in Denmark when they see that people have, are in this kind of, I would say, moral decay where, teenagers are getting drunk, having sex, all these things. They don't like that. So they become even more radical in their own religion. Whereas they actually do respect Christians here when they see they have a faith.
Okay.
So you could, so I think as Christians, we could talk to them about who is God. Because he also said to me yesterday, this scholar from Nigeria, he said, I'm actually learning Arabic because I want to have, I want to be able to speak with them in their own language.
Yeah,
Because I have to make friends with imams and other Muslims and then try to convert them.
Yeah.
And I think we should be much more focused on that also here in Europe or in America, instead of just being so occupied within our own, political matters within the church. And I think it's much more important right now to try to convert the Muslims, to save the Western civilization.
We have Antonia here. Antonia, I've traveled with Antonia on pilgrimage. She's a wonderful woman. And she says, in Iran, millions converted to Christianity. I'm not sure of all the numbers here, but certainly something has happened in Iran. At least Antonia has some information about that.
But it's true. I know, but still, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
Gesundheit.
but still, the situation is that there is a lot of violence against Christians. We have 380 million Christians being persecuted around the globe right now. And here in the Western countries, we see that Islam is taking more and more over in France, in the UK, even in Italy, in Sweden, in the Scandinavian countries. That's our reality. And we could do much more to try to tell them about another God than Allah. I mean, we could do a lot here because we're free
Mhm.
to do it. We still have the freedom of speech. We still are allowed to evangelize. But
Yeah.
at a certain point, if there are too many Muslims, we're not allowed to do it anymore.
If,
So we should do it now before it's too late.
well, this is, as we are ending, get drawing near to the end here of our conversation, and you started with the beautiful story of going to an open church where you were free to go and receive and sit silently and join with others. But if all the churches are closed, the two ways that can happen are in a very secular society. In an extremely secular society, becomes finally atheistic. It could be a communist or just a very secular humanist society. The churches and the religious institutions are first marginalized and finally they are prohibited. And then in a very different religion, Islam, which believes that it's got the truth and it must oppress the other religions, you also could see the churches closed. So I almost feel that our conversation is like a moment in time, just while things are still free, but just on the vigil of perhaps tremendous changes, which will be a time of new persecution, even in Europe and in America. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very likely, and that's why I want people to wake up now and start to at least try what they can do to convert um, Muslims into the Catholic faith. Because then, I mean, these people, they do believe in God and they are ready to fight for it because they're fighting for their own faith. So if we can make them become Catholics, then the Catholic Church could be really strong. If you make all these young men that are Muslims becoming Catholics, I mean, it would be really great.
All right, Eben, you told me we had to end the program in about 1 hour. We're approaching 1 hour. If we could just conclude by looking forward during 2025 with how you plan your own life and what you are looking for in the world, what are some hopes you have and some fears you have, and then wish us all a new year, happy new year.
Well, first of all, we have to remember that this is the Jubilee year, and
Oh,
this is the year of hope. So I think we should, go forward with and expect a lot of hope because this is the Jubilee year, and we have. For me, that's really a great year. I'm going to Rome. I'm going to be in Rome for Easter and all of April. I'm really looking forward to it,
yes.
and I think the world really needs hope right now. And since we are Catholics and we know that our only hope is Christ, the Logos, and it is the Jubilee year, I think there must be a lot of opportunities for us to spread this hope in a world that is full of fear and also, like I said, a lot of people who are suffering mentally, especially in the Western world, and we have all the persecuted Christians. So we should just work for, giving people hope. And this would be what I would like to do here in 2025, to try to spread hope and light and love. Because this is what this is the reason why Christ established his church in this world, was that we could be light and salt. And we should be that, especially this year because it's the Jubilee year.
All right. That's very beautiful, Eben. So I'll look forward to seeing you in Rome in April. We'll share a plate of spaghetti
Yeah,
and we
it's going to be
will
great.
we'll do some more podcasts and maybe we could do a book together.
Yeah, I would be delighted to do that.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. And please, if you can, if you feel that you like the program, click on the like button. If you want to tell others about this program, that helps us. And we appreciate you all very much. And we wish you all a beautiful new year and looking to see you next time.